Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. That summer, it became clear that it was our last visit to the cottage by the lake. We had decided it was time to pass it on to our children, who wanted to keep it in the family. With each passing year, it had become harder for us to make the trips, especially in the summer months, unlike the days when we were young and full of energy. Our home had already been sold, and we were preparing for the next chapter of our lives in a different city. All our belongings were packed and sent to storage in the gated community where we planned to move in September. We left the cottage with only the clothes on our backs. We had also sold the car, leaving the old one parked by the lake, ready for our children to use when they arrived. Our new residence was in a retirement home, specially designed for a comfortable life at this stage. A small medical facility was nearby, part of a larger network, so medical help was always within reach. Shopping had become easier, and most of the time you could just hop in a golf cart and go about your errands. The weather was pleasant year-round, a welcome change. It seemed like the perfect place to spend the last years of our lives. We had lived a full life. Linda loved me with all her heart, and I loved her just as deeply. Over the years, we had argued more than once, but in the end, we complemented each other. Although our physical closeness had diminished over time, Linda remained a passionate woman, and we found other ways to maintain our emotional connection. We still kissed, hugged, and found comfort in quiet moments together. The act of hugging never lost its meaning, and sometimes we managed to reignite that spark of passion. Raising children brought us immeasurable joy. Each of them had found their own path in life, wonderful partners, and achieved success in their chosen ways. Together, Linda and I raised 4 children, and now we were surrounded by 10 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren, which filled our hearts with pride. Our children had always been our greatest source of happiness. One late August evening, the sky glowed with shades of pink and gold as the sun began to set, and the familiar sound of dragonflies filled the air. In this quiet moment, Linda turned to me and said, "There's something I need to tell you." I had expected this, sensing that this conversation would happen someday, and I was ready for it. In such a close-knit family, secrets rarely stay hidden for long. I had my own, and I wouldn't have been surprised if Linda knew them all. As for her secrets, I had long known the one that mattered most. "Yes," I replied calmly. I knew this conversation was coming. I had thought it would happen before our move, though I expected her to wait until we were closer to leaving. "You knew?" she asked in surprise. "How could you have known? I only decided today to tell you about how much alcohol I've been drinking lately." "Yes, my dear, I've noticed," I replied gently. "I saw that it was troubling you, especially since we've been drinking a lot of wine together. But I don't think you're becoming an alcoholic. I think you're just trying to ease the pain of your arthritis." "No," she shook her head. It's not that at all." "No, darling, that's not what I'm trying to say. We need to talk." "Oh no, you mean you found my stash?" "No." "The DNA test results?" Her voice faltered, tension hanging in the air. "Darling, there's nothing left to hide. I already know everything." "You did the DNA test?" "I did, almost 2 years ago, but I didn't really need it. The moment she was born, I saw his face in her. She was Linda's, but she wasn't mine. When you insisted on naming her Ava, everything became clear. It was obvious. You and James Miller deceived me. You named her after him, didn't you? When they took her blood after she was born, it was clear she wasn't mine. And later, when DNA tests became more accessible, I got a sample of James's hair. The results were undeniable. She's his. And you carried that with you all these years. Thomas, I'm truly sorry, I mean it. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because we created something beautiful, and deep down I hoped it would never fall apart. I genuinely cared for you, and your infidelity didn't disrupt the rhythm of our everyday life. My main concern was always ensuring the kids felt stable, knowing we were both there for them. That's why I kept quiet about knowing about your affair. I knew you wouldn't have done the same. In fact, I always believed you would have sought revenge if our roles were reversed. Normally, I don't stay silent, but since you and James were careful with your affair and didn't confront me directly, Susan and I decided not to act. She took her time to understand what I was talking about. Susan was James's wife until his death a few years ago. She took her own life a year before our conversation. We always knew how to balance the scales. While you and James slipped away to the back seat of his car or disappeared into the woods, Susan and I were busy at home making children he thought were his. "What did you just say?" she murmured. "Yes," I calmly replied. "James and Susan never had a chance to have children together. They tried for years, spending a fortune on fertility treatments, all in vain, because James's sperm wasn't viable. But somehow, against all odds, you became the lucky recipient of one of his rare successes. But here's the truth. All their children are mine." "Do they know?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, they know. She told them everything before she died, and each of them has spoken with me at length about it. James will always remain their father in their eyes, and they love him for raising them. But they also understand why Susan made the choices she did. In a way, they've come to terms with it, realizing that if things had been different, they might never have been born." "You got what you wanted, didn't you?" she suddenly asked. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. "When we got married, you always said you wanted a big family. I didn't want more than 4 children, but somehow you ended up with 8. 12, actually," I corrected her. Her eyes widened as the truth started to sink in. Susan wasn't the last part of this story. And then her shock deepened as another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "My nieces, they're yours too, aren't they?" she whispered. "Well, let's give Aunt Linda a round of applause," I chuckled. She used to joke that her nieces looked more like me than their own family. "Yes, your sister saw you and Roger sneaking away that night during our vacation. She followed you to the beach, where you found a lounger to relax on. She also overheard your conversation, the one where you excitedly reminisced about how thrilling it was to see each other naked earlier when we were all sunbathing. You even made plans to meet on Thursdays when we got home. You started taking dance lessons, and he said he'd go bowling. Once a month, you both skipped those lessons to meet at a motel. We've got some great pictures. I've even scanned them onto my laptop if you want to take a stroll down memory lane before bed. A little tour of your passionate adventures. And by the way, I've gathered evidence of your other escapades, too." She looked utterly stunned, frozen in shock at my revelation. "Calm down. I've never had to carefully plan my revenge. Fate always intervened and did it for me, punishing people in ways I could never have orchestrated myself. Maybe you just bring bad luck. Just look at Michael Williams, the UPS guy. He got caught dealing illegal substances, right? The police caught him red-handed. Turns out he was hiding the stuff among the packages he delivered, even secretly dropping it off at the doorsteps of his regular clients. As far as I know, he's still rotting in prison. While you were fooling around with your boss, someone tipped his wife off to spy on him during his Wednesday lunch breaks. She caught him in the act. He didn't stand a chance. She divorced him and took everything he had. And you got off scot-free. You were his Tuesday girl. And she never found out. Don't worry. Your secret's safe with me. Remember the day the exterminator died in his truck? It was the same day he worked at our house, and you decided to thank him with a special service. Somehow there was a leak in his chemical tanks, and when the fumes mixed, his van turned into a toxic chamber. At least his death was quick. And then there was George Brown, Junior Diaz's teacher. They found him burned to ashes in his own bed. The firefighters said it looked like he fell asleep with a cigarette, and the fire engulfed him. You knew about all of this, didn't you? And you never tried to stop me. Why? Was this your plan all along? To kick me out of the house, force me into a divorce, and leave me stuck in some dingy apartment? Meanwhile, you'd stay in my house, living off my money, and I'd see the kids once every 2 weeks, maybe twice a month, working myself to death just to support 2 families. And as the cherry on top, I'd be left without the chance to meet anyone else, spending my lonely, dull old age alone. No way. Linda, you used to be everything I ever dreamed of. You took such good care of me and the kids. The house was always in order, and you made more money than some people make working 2 jobs. You were amazing, and you still are. I could never completely let you go, But I betrayed you. I cheated. And you, well, you were insatiable, selfish, always wanting more. But what you did opened the door for me too. I slept with so many women I lost count. It was a wild ride. Tall, short, curvy, slim, blondes, brunettes, redheads, toned, soft, intellectuals, or fun-loving. I had them all. Women of every kind. I've been with athletes, brainiacs, celebrities, and those who went unnoticed by everyone. It didn't matter if they were rough or gentle, cold or passionate. I went through them all. So don't feel like you need to spill everything in detail. I haven't revealed my secrets. You know what you know, and maybe I don't know as much as I think. We sat together for a while longer, sipping the smooth red wine and watching the sun dip below the horizon. The evening filled with the chorus of frogs and crickets, and a sense of calm washed over me. After some time, she stood up and went to bed. The night passed in silence, and I dozed off in the chair, a faint smile on my lips, as I finally comprehended everything she had come to know. At dawn, Linda found him still there on the porch, gently rocking back and forth. His hand firmly gripped the stem of a glass, half filled with wine. He exuded calmness, and a soft, warm smile played across his face. The previous evening, she had cried when he revealed a truth to her that she had never expected to hear. But as the new day broke, a sense of peace settled over her. Suddenly, it became clear to her that she had long desired more than Thomas could ever offer. Though he had been her most passionate lover, her needs had always exceeded what he could give. Other men had crossed her path, and she had never regretted it. An unnoticed sense of justice crept into her soul when she realized that Thomas had fathered the children of other women. It seemed to balance their life together. She had suspected that during their mysterious financial struggles, when they had to cut back on expenses, Thomas might have been supporting her sister or Susan Miller, or perhaps even their children. And yet, he had always treated their youngest daughter as his own. The thought that the tragic accidents that had befallen her former lovers might not have been accidents at all suddenly struck her. Perhaps Thomas had taken matters into his own hands. Strangely enough, this realization also brought her some closure. Thomas had always been a man who took what he desired, and losing her to another man was not a challenge he could ignore. What surprised her most was his ability to separate their family life from these tangled affairs. Everything that happened outside their home stayed there, until that very night. His love for her had been deep, unwavering, and absolute. This remarkable man had accepted her flaws and loved her as she was, drawing strength from the imperfections that defined their relationship. He had played by the rules she had set, and realizing this made her love him even more. As she held his cold, stone-like hand for the last time, the guilt she had carried for her insatiable desires began to dissolve. She lifted the glass he had been holding and took a deep breath. There was no trace of his familiar scent. He had chosen his own path to leave this world. Thomas had never intended to move. His heart had always belonged to the lake. She picked up the phone and dialed their eldest son's number, asking him to come to the lake as soon as possible. She broke the news. His father was gone. Then she contacted her eldest niece and Patricia Miller, Thomas's sister. After all the calls, she sat down in the rocking chair beside him, leaned in close, and kissed him goodbye. "Thank you, my love," she whispered to his peaceful smile, still lingering on his lips, before finishing the remaining wine. The bitterness vanished instantly as she realized how Thomas had taught her to savor the complexity of his tastes. Sweetness mixed with hints of plum and blackcurrant, leaving a long cherry finish on her tongue. It was exquisite. The lake shimmered under the golden sunlight, reflecting its beauty back at her. It was perfect. She closed her eyes, and in that moment, the world around her became utterly still and silent. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. My entire life seems like an endless series of disappointments. I can't bear it any longer. My hatred for my wife runs deep, and my feelings for the family are practically non-existent. The only thing keeping me afloat is my job. It's far from exciting, but it brings a strange sense of satisfaction. My name is Oliver Wilson, and I am a medical equipment technician. My job involves installing, calibrating, and servicing various medical devices in hospitals and imaging centers. I'm good at it. It's the only area of my life where I don't feel like a failure. And the rest? It's in complete decay. I've been married to Isla for 23 long years. We even went to the same school, but I didn't pay attention to her until I graduated from technical college. To be honest, I was never the guy you'd call attractive. I wasn't into sports, and social events never interested me. I didn't even attend the prom. Isla entered my life suddenly. One day we bumped into each other, and before I knew it, we were a couple. Back in school, Isla was practically inseparable from Richard Smith. They were always together. Richard? I barely knew him, but from what I'd heard, he wasn't the brightest. He struggled with school, and keeping a job seemed like an impossible task for him. So when Isla started paying attention to me, I admit I felt flattered. Maybe she was looking for something better. Isla was my first and, as it turned out, only partner. Shortly after we started dating, we got married, and 5 years later she became pregnant. I managed to get a decent job, and by the time Isla was pregnant with our daughter Mia, we had already bought a house. For a while it seemed like everything was going well, but really, what did I know? I had no idea what a real marriage was supposed to look like. I thought our marriage was normal simply because I had nothing to compare it to. Isla often traveled to visit her mother and sisters. I rarely went with her, usually because of work, and she didn't seem to mind traveling alone. Now, looking back, it all starts to make sense. As I gained more experience at work, opportunities for relocation began to arise. Every time a new job came up, it came with a higher salary and a more prestigious position. However, Isla only agreed to move if it brought us closer to where her family lived. I started taking on more hours at work, which didn't seem to bother her, and I began paying off the mortgage. Despite these improvements, our relationship remained stagnant. Our intimacy was, to say the least, mediocre, and we never built the deep connection that other couples seem to enjoy. We were more like two strangers living under the same roof. I tried to minimize the time I spent around her, mostly because her presence was far from pleasant. But the real problem was the kids. I found it hard to accept that they were mine, especially considering the chaos they brought into our lives. George had been arrested 3 times for fighting. Somehow, he always managed to avoid serious legal consequences. Every time I tried to impose some kind of punishment, Isla quickly put a stop to it. She made it clear that I had no right to be involved in raising her children. Mia wasn't much easier. Her rebellion manifested in different ways. She was rarely home and seemed to live without any rules. If there was a place on her body for a piercing, it was already there. Although her natural hair was chestnut, she constantly dyed it black, complemented by dark nail polish and black lipstick. Any criticism or attempt to set boundaries on my part was immediately dismissed by Isla. It seemed like the 3 of them existed in a separate universe, where I was irrelevant. In my own home, I was nothing more than a piece of furniture no one noticed. I considered the only positive quality of my children to be their frequent absence from home. The problem was, they rarely accompanied Isla on her trips to visit her parents. The kids constantly complained that it was boring there. Isla had been away for a week now. One of my former colleagues from the hospital came to the office for training on the new digital X-ray machines. "Liam, good to see you. How's it going?" I greeted him, my tone light and casual. "Hey, Oliver, I'm okay. Sorry to hear about your situation with Isla," Liam replied. I froze. Situation? What situation? And why did Liam know about issues in my marriage before I did? A heavy silence hung between us as I tried to process the unexpected comment. Oliver, did I say something wrong? Sorry if I crossed a line," Liam added uncertainly. "Liam, tell me what you know." My voice was firm, though my mind was still clouded with confusion. "Look, Oliver, I didn't mean to upset you. I've just been off my game lately and said something without thinking," Liam started to explain. "Cut the crap, Liam. Tell me what you've heard about my marriage or I'm going to lose it," I was quickly losing my patience. Well, you see, everyone thought you and Isla had split up, considering how much time she's been spending with Richard. She's been with him every day for the whole week. Sorry, man. Liam clearly felt uncomfortable. I stood there, stunned. What do you mean by spending time with Richard? I asked sharply. Richard's in hospice now. The hospital just opened a unit for patients like him. He has leukemia, and the doctors say he only has a few months left, maybe even weeks. Isla's been there constantly, Oliver, day and night. She's even stayed overnight a few times. I haven't spoken to her personally, but everyone's noticed. At that moment, everything fell into place. For over 2 decades, I had believed that Isla's frequent trips to her hometown were to visit her family, her mother, her sisters. But no, she was meeting Richard, her old boyfriend. I wasn't the one she truly loved. I was just the one who provided financial stability, a roof over her head, and money to support the kids. Then another thought hit me like a hammer. The kids, were they even mine? Liam, I need a favor. My voice was calm, despite the storm raging inside. Anything, Oliver. What do you need? Can you get me a sample of Richard Smith's DNA? Of course, Liam replied. His DNA is already in the database. Do you have Wi-Fi here? 5 minutes later, I was looking at a copy of Richard's DNA results. I thanked Liam, who returned to his training, leaving me alone with a truth I had never expected to learn. My next step was becoming frighteningly clear. After many years of living a life I had grown to despise, I finally mustered the courage to take a serious step. The rest of the day went smoothly. The company offered me options to relocate to 6 different places, but the chance to move to Belize caught my eye. They had been struggling to fill the position for a while, and when I agreed, their enthusiasm was genuine. After lunch, I headed straight to the bank and withdrew all my money. I knew I could handle the credit cards over the phone. The only serious issue left was the mortgage. We had built up considerable equity in the house, and its value had increased significantly over the years. Although I wasn't entirely sure how I would handle the mortgage, I knew time was working against me. My attention quickly shifted to another urgent task, getting DNA proof from the kids. There was a rundown tattoo parlor nearby. I had DNA samples from work, and I had a plan. To get a legal tattoo, you have to be over 18. I decided to use that to my advantage by offering the kids tattoos before they reached that age. They eagerly agreed. The tattoo artist, who seemed friendly enough, agreed to do the tattoos for the kids and convinced them to give DNA samples as part of the preparation. I signed everything without hesitation. When I got home, the kids were already there by coincidence. I told them I had vouchers for 2 free tattoos. They immediately started arguing over who would go first, and I, pretending to be a hesitant father, reluctantly agreed. 20 minutes later, I had their DNA samples and my kids had their first tattoos. I could only imagine Isla's fury. On the way back, I stopped at a hospital lab and dropped off the samples. The lab technician assured me the results would be ready the next day, and they would also include a sample from Richard. When I returned home, the kids eagerly showed off their new tattoos to their friends. I started packing the essentials into the car. I didn't need much. I already had my passport and a substantial amount of cash. The next morning, I told the kids they would be skipping school. I hinted that I had a surprise for them, but didn't reveal the details. A few hours later, we were driving toward the town where my cheating wife constantly went. Just as I parked, my phone buzzed. The results confirmed what I had expected. Richard was indeed the father of George and Mia. Finding the hospice wasn't hard. A nurse directed us to the room where Richard was. Smiling, I nudged the kids toward the hallway and said, "Go, meet your father." Their confused faces stared at me as they hesitantly made their way down the hall. As soon as they were out of sight, I turned and quickly left the hospital. I turned off my phone and began the drive back, stopping only briefly to refuel and grab a snack. My car was already packed and I didn't need anything from the house. Isla's clothes, her personal items, and the kids' belongings were all left behind. I had a decent relationship with 4 of the neighbors, though none of them could stand my kids. Still, they got along with me. I went around to each of them, asking for a little gas for the lawnmower. Placed 4 large fuel canisters on the porch while they all watched in silence. One by one, I carried them inside, poured the contents, and returned the empty containers to their owners. Don't rush to call the fire department, I advised. Wait until the fire really gets going. It would be smart to grab some garden hoses and soak the roofs well. We wouldn't want the fire to spread, right? They stood there, eyes wide open, unsure how to react. Finally, John Felix broke the awkward silence. Hey, Oliver, mind if I borrow your lawnmower? I chuckled quietly. Sure, John. Go ahead, use it. If anyone else wants to grab something, I added with a grin, better do it now before it's too late. Within minutes, they were scrambling to take everything they could from the garage. It was almost amusing to watch them hustle, but I appreciated their unspoken support. When they finished, everyone returned to their homes, preparing their hoses just in case things went sideways. When everything was ready, I went inside and started the fire in several strategic spots. I didn't have much time, so I had to move quickly. I knew the statute of limitations on arson was 6 years, provided no one died, but I was sure that by then, I'd be long gone. I waved casually to the neighbors as I left, fully aware that I would never return here. 3 days later, I found myself in a cabin by the lake, ready to start a new life. What happened afterward? About a week later, Richard died. His life insurance payout wasn't bad, and his mother was the primary beneficiary. The insurance company refused to cover the fire damage. It's hard to argue with arson when 4 witnesses saw it. George turned 18 and got arrested again for dealing drugs. This time, he was sentenced to 5 to 12 years. Mia fled the country, got involved in some underground film industry, and disappeared without a trace 3 months later. And Isla? She stayed in her mother's house. From what I've heard, she and her sister don't get along very well. Their family is barely scraping by, as Isla's sister has 3 young kids. Her husband left when he realized the youngest child wasn't his. All in all, it doesn't concern me anymore. I'm moving on, and that's exactly what I'm doing. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.